Well, thank you, Brooklyn. It's a pleasure to see you and everyone in the class this morning. And thanks for making me feel bad again about used to being your neighbor. So yeah, I'm glad to be here. I certainly enjoyed my time. Glad to be here in Walker, up in the northwest corner, but certainly enjoyed my time there in Spalding County. Brooklyn asked me to talk totally about tomatoes, so I'm going to try to stick with that topic. There's about 70 slides total. About the first 25 is what I expect we may be able to get to within the 45 minutes. So if we're not through the end of it and people need to go, I understand. I typically talk too much anyway. Um, let's start with finding some information online. Even a mouse can be advantageous in the garden. Brooklyn, I suspect rather, that you're still seeing the export resources sources, the field report
Yes.
site. Is that yes?
Yes, that's correct. So we
So
can
this
still
is where
see
you find
your,
our publications. I'll show you the web link here in a minute. But this is where you find our publications, now lovingly known as field reports. And if you put your keyword into that search box, uh, um, which one way the website link that I'm at is fieldreport.caes.uga.edu. And I'll show you that in a minute. But within that, if you put your topic, your keyword, then it's going to bring up the information that University of Georgia has developed. And you can see we have found 418 results, starting with a commercial publication, which is advantageous. I encourage you to look at that, as well as some newer things that I may or may not have looked at by now. But this one on keeping plants healthy. But I wanted to point out the top one, Commercial Tomato Production Handbook. It's about 40 pages. If you're going to be interested in maybe looking at a high tunnel type of production system, a little bit grander scale, then we have one specific to high tunnel production in Georgia with the tactics. I will call your attention to the tomato diseases in Georgia because within 45 minutes, we rarely scratch the surface on some of our topics. But we've got a great publication, and tomatoes are affected by too many diseases. So you will want to look at that, not only the disease, but also some cultural practices to help you out. We spend a few moments on staking and pruning, but you can find an entire publication on that one. And I'm trying to get here. If back to her tomato sandwich, I prefer Duke's mayonnaise. So your choice is up to you, but I prefer Duke's salt and pepper and a good slice. And then, of course, a lot of what I'm talking about today comes from our home Georgia homegrown tomato publication that I hope to just embellish a little bit. But I encourage you to find those publications. Before I leave the internet and go back to the publication, I wanted to point out that UGA also has an environmental data monitoring network with monitoring stations all across the site. I'm way up here in Walker County, Lafayette, Georgia, the last station in the northwest corner. You guys are down here just south of Atlanta. There's actually three water drops right there. You have to dial in to find the Griffin station, one in Griffin Dempsey and one in Williamson, or you can go to this box right here and find your local station. Before I leave this page, I want to also call your attention to the calculator. You can put a range of dates in there and find the information as described here, which includes the first and last average frost date for your region. This is found at georgiaweather.net, and then find your closest weather station. Let's see what's going on in Lafayette right at the moment. We are at 66 degrees, looking for mid 70s today. One of the things I like about this site is you get the common stuff: temperature, humidity, atmospheric pressure, the wind speed, direction, but you also get soil temperatures at 2, 4, and 8 inches. And a knowledgeable gardener would appreciate that information to understand when it's time to put seeds in the ground or when it's time to put warm season plants in the ground. So you get that information. Another aspect that I like with this is the fact that you get to look at the calculator and learn about soil temperatures, rainfall, chilling hours, and then those cooling degree days. So now I want to make sure that I am sharing my homegrown tomatoes. Did the title slide show up?
No, you're probably going to have to stop sharing and then
Okay.
reshare that slide.
Share it again. This is where I start panicking.
No.
Did it share now?
We're on the right slide, starting with homegrown tomatoes. So we're right
All
with
right.
you.
Well, that's where we're at today. Tomatoes are in the Solanaceae family, all of them Solanium lycopersicum. And we are talking about Georgia homegrown tomatoes. That's one of the publications that I just pointed out to you. Find it. It's only 7 pages. It's quick and easy and to the point on how to get your tomatoes off to a good start and growing. There's the page that I promised to show you, or the website right there. This is the title page for that publication, and the address is fieldreport.caes.uga.edu. So find that. Not only does it work for tomatoes, but whatever subject, put homegrown in there, and you'll be surprised at what you find with just the words homegrown. So today, and then I'll reference the commercial publication as well as the organic high tunnel. There's information depending on your scale, and there's cultural practices that go into more depth within these commercial publications. So you may want to find those as well. So the tomato in the Solanaceae family, which includes peppers, eggplants, Irish potatoes, tobacco, even the nightshade plants are in that family. Nightshade carrying some toxic properties, even for tomatoes, were considered poisonous for many years. They were originally, as I read recently, started in South America in an area from Ecuador to Chile, but not surprising, domesticated first in Mexico, been making salsa for a long time. Made its way over to Europe in the 1500s. The history that I saw shows that it was probably a yellow tomato, referred to as a golden apple, or pomodoro in Italian. Made its way to the U.S. in 1710, and later in that century began growing in popularity as a food item up until now. And look at what it is now. It is the most popular vegetable. Is it a vegetable or a fruit, Brooklyn? I'm so confused. But it is the most popular vegetable or fruit, either way that you want to take it, in the world, grown in just about every country, even commercial production, that is. And in Georgia, it's $100 million crop, with the top 10 counties you can see across the top: Decatur, Colquitt, Rabun up in the northeast corner, and Habersham, not too far from Rabun, and then Hall in the northern end of the state. So even some northern counties getting into the tomato production in a top 10 manner. And then several states, certainly California and Florida, lead in domestic production, but especially in the summer, Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia are strong producers of fresh market tomatoes. Tomatoes. Remember a few years ago, I haven't seen an advertisement in a while, but they were advertising the upside down tomato. I prefer to grow mine in the garden, in the soil, and tomatoes are a perennial, but they are treated or cultivated as an annual. So it will not survive a heavy frost. It does not grow well outdoors in most parts of the country. It's going to require from transplanting, and remember or understand that you'll want to start seeds 6 to 8 weeks sooner before you can transplant them outdoors. And tomatoes typically require about 75 days from transplanting until that first harvest. And if it's an indeterminate variety, can produce all the way through that first frost. Tomatoes are a lot like me, fat guy, likes temperature 70 to 85 degrees during the daytime. Nighttime temperatures somewhat cooler, 65 to 70. Their production can be significantly affected by higher or lower temperatures. One reason why I point out GeorgiaWeather.net and the fact that tomatoes are a warm season crop. You want warm soil temperatures, 65 degrees or better consistently before putting those transplants in the ground. Starting those seeds, you can find a great seed starting publication at our field report site. But if you're starting seeds 6 to 8 weeks earlier to grow a healthy transplant, and if they're indoors, typically the indoor temperature would be warm enough, but you may need a warming mat to put those on. Tomatoes are a self-pollinating plant when they're grown outdoors. They can be pollinated by wind currents, and if you're in a high tunnel and you've got sufficient ventilation or air movement, you might even pollinate them inside. Can be pollinated by yourself with a Q-tip or a small brush, painter's brush or some sort, or let the bees do it or bumblebees do it. But they do need to be pollinated several times. Just to throw up a slide of some varieties that are out there, whether they're seeds or transplants. So you might recognize your favorite variety. I think my favorite variety is a Better Boy, but there's really not a tomato that I really haven't liked. There's some of the heirlooms that I'm not big on. But heirloom, is just another word to say old or historical. But there's numerous. And when you see these in the catalog, one of the things they're going to point out is that they're all non-GMO. They may be a lot of hybridization, a lot of crossbreeding going on, but they are not a genetically modified organism. So transplants, I'll get to that in a minute. So when you're going to grow your tomatoes, you need to choose what type variety you want to grow. We mentioned earlier indeterminate briefly, but the varieties or tomatoes are divided into two different types. Determinate, which are bush type, shorter, bushier. They will bloom and bear flower and fruit all about the same time, making them a good selection for canning. The second type is indeterminate. Those are the ones that will produce all season long. Once it starts flowering, it will flower, grow fruit, grow some more, have more flowers and more fruit, and will produce until something gives it a reason to not produce. Often it's frost, and I have in the past grown some tomatoes. Thanksgiving is the latest that I've ever grown one, but I have grown some up until Thanksgiving. As far as the varieties go, there is no end. If you've never looked at a vegetable seed catalog, uh, find yourself one that you like. Twilly Seeds is a good one. Burpee. There are numerous sites, and just look at all the varieties of tomatoes that are available. There is no end. Uh, Another consideration into your varieties is to put as much resistance, disease resistance, into that variety. Tomatoes, many varieties are bred to be resistant to certain pests. Resistant does not mean immune, but they are better to avoid, delay, to resist that particular disease problem. Or with nematodes, small microscopic soil-borne insect or worm, um, you can get some resistance there. And the resistance is typically indicated to the purchaser by abbreviations on the plant label or in a seed catalog on the variety description. And there are numerous. I've listed a few on the left side. There are a few more. This one happens to be the one that Twilly Seeds has in their catalog, but look for as much resistance as you can in selecting your varieties. Brooklyn assured me that you guys are well versed in vegetable gardening, so just a couple of reminders. Uh, it's great if you can have full sun close to the house, which makes it easy for the gardener to get out in that garden several times a week. And close to the house will typically give you access to a source of water for irrigation. To expound upon that a little bit, tomatoes are going to want 6 to 8 hours of full sunshine for good growth. You want to avoid, not just for tomatoes, but with your vegetable gardens, don't crowd them in along trees and hedges where there's shade and competition. If you have black walnut trees, understand that plants, the Solanaceae family, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, are negatively affected by a chemical. Juglin has an allelopathic relationship to tomatoes, peppers, solanaceous crops, so don't plant them within the drip zone of black walnut trees. You want as good a soil as you can provide, one that's loose, well drained, has lots of organic matter. Last three things there, that's part of a vegetable gardening talk that I do. You may need to protect your garden from various intruders, children, pets. Bigfoot is a common pest up our way. Rows ought to be east to west. And of course, taller crops on the west or north side. Specifically to tomatoes, full sun is a must. That well-drained, rich soil with a pH of 6 to 7, preferably dialing in to 6.2, 6.8 is preferable. There's a couple of ways to look at how you space them. If you're not going to do any pruning, you can should space them about 4 feet from anything, certainly another tomato plant. If you're going to stake them, which indeterminate varieties should be staked. Bush varieties work best in a cage, but they can be supported as well. So consider staking. If you're going to tighten them up and do some pruning, you can, in the row, put your plants as tight as 24 inches between those staked plants with at least 4 feet between rows. And you could even tighten that up a little bit depending on your management practices. In general, drip irrigation is the best, but in general, watering is going to be 1 to 2 inches per week. We typically in Georgia will get an inch of water a week, most weeks, but supplementation is often needed. It's best to deliver that on a drip basis and limit that to 1 to 2 applications per week. You don't have to keep the soil consistently, constantly moist, but you don't also want to let them completely dry out and become drought stressed. But limit your irrigation applications to deep and infrequent 1 to 2 times a week as compared to frequent light irrigations. Mulch them with something, whether it's pine straw or a wheat or rye straw. That's going to keep soil from splashing up onto the stems and the fruit and lower leaves. It will also help to suppress weeds. So no matter what you use some type of mulch around your tomatoes. You know, our commercial guys, even many home gardeners, not just a weed fabric, but may put them under plastic with plastic culture. And then don't grow tomatoes in the same spot every year. Rotate them in the same spot no more than once every few years. If you can rotate 2, 3, 4 years, come back to that spot. Practice good crop rotation. Okay, that's some of the big basics. For the rest of these slides, I'm going to try to start moving faster if I haven't already. We talked about a good loose soil, one that will allow you to have well-drained, loose, tillable soil. This soil is tracking in well deeper, at least heel deep on those boots. Rows wide enough for mechanical cultivation if you want a mechanical advantage, but avoid the small, tight, heavy soils that won't drain. It's only going to be a disappointment. Look at all the competition there as well. Maybe get your neighbor to allow you to use some of that sunshine over there for the tomatoes, but a site not to have. We have emphasized that soil is the most important, full of organic matter. Just look at what this tiller, and note that it is a rear tine tiller. If you have a front tine tiller, I'm sorry, I might look for a different one. A rear tine tiller is best, but good loose soil, and the gentleman is standing over to the side not to add to compaction to that row. You could come back and bed that even more to improve the drainage for that site. So a good loose soil. If you're building a soil from scratch, be generous in the organic manner that you're going to add. Till the site first, as deep as you can, preferably 8 to 12 inches, and then layer in your soil amendment. Start with 2 to 4 inches of that soil amendment and till that into the native site. That soil amendment can be a sterile bagged amendment. In your area, there's going to be bulk supplies that you can purchase from garden centers of various sorts. You might even know somebody that makes more compost than they can use. Topsoil, be careful with what is sold as topsoil, because it may just be what they scraped off the top of the ground. Topsoil itself takes a little time to nurture. And then blend all of that together in an homogeneous mixture. Don't create 2 distinct layers. 2 examples there. I'm going to expand upon that a little bit, starting in the upper left corner. The point here is Miracle-Gro products can have a charged soil, a fertilizer content. You're going to pay more for that. Numerous ways to find composted animal manures. This is one from EarthGrow, as well as a bagged topsoil from EarthGrow. In the middle, peat moss can be an amendment for your soil, but limit it to 30% by volume of what's going in. Various pine barks, even a ground pine bark, kind of a bigger nugget than this one. You can also find ground pine bark. Products sold as soil conditioner. There's black cow. You can buy bagged chicken manure. You can make your own compost. These are from wood chips and other carbon sources and some nitrogen sources in a home compost kit. You get the finished product that can be added. And then here is an example of a wheat or rye straw that could be used as a mulch. But use a lot and blend it into a homogeneous mixture. There's a kind of a homemade recipe using animal composted animal animal manure that's completely composted with traditional compost and whatever good topsoil that you can find to go with it. You will fill your bed, and based on what you fill it with, can vary from expensive to inexpensive. And each year, you'll likely need to replenish that bed with an inch or more of that soil. Raised beds are advantageous for lots of reasons. My favorite reason is it allows you to improve a poorly drained area and then garden in it. But find the reason that you like and find an affection for raised bed. A few other advantages: they warm quicker in the spring, in late winter, allowing us to get started earlier. They will typically not require us to have expensive cultivation equipment. We can work it with hand tools, working it from each side of the bed and keeping our feet actually out of the bed. So find a good reason that you like and find a reason to plant in raised beds. There are some disadvantages. Maybe the biggest among those is that they're a little bit more costly to build and fill. They do dry out, can require a little more frequent irrigation, and they do not always work into a rotation system. And they tend to get crowded a little bit too much by our gardeners. So diseases and insects can be more of a problem, but avoid heavy plant density. And they do not always work well for vining, sprawling types. Tomatoes can work if you'll leave them some type of a trellis system. There's all shapes and sizes and materials that you can get. I'm not going to dwell much on that. You know that as well as I do. Choose your best, your favorite, and get going with it. Once you get one, fill it up with all that different organic matter. This example shows one that is 4 feet wide, allowing you to work from one side of the other with handheld cultivation equipment and not get in that bed. The site was tilled first, and then these amendments blended into that site soil. Brooklyn assured me with the general gardening that she's talked about, she's likely talked about soil testing, the importance of lime and pH. I'm not going to dwell on it too much because I got to be done here in just a few minutes. But I do want to point out a couple of things. One, that pH scale goes from 0 to 14. Most of our vegetables are going to want to be in this 6 to 7 range, with tomatoes preferring that 6.2 to 6.8 to hit that sweet spot. Why is that so important? Well, there's 7 on the high end of the range. There's 6. We want our vegetables in this sweet spot. There are 16 different minerals that plants need. The major minerals, major nutrients they need are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And within this pH range, the availability of our nutrients are greatest. N, P, and K at their greatest availability. If we drop below that 6, and the further south from 6 we go, the worse it gets. The desired nutrients become less available to the plant, potassium even becoming less available, but others become more available, and manganese and aluminum, and when the pHs are low, are readily available and can provide plant toxicity. So that's my emphasis on understanding your pH and soil testing with the Brooklyn and or wherever you're at, your county agent. So we've got our beds ready. We've started seeds. We've grown a good transplant. A bag of seeds will cost you about $5 for 25 seeds. Transplants are going to show up, according to my garden center, about mid-March, which is too early for me. You know why they sell tomato transplants in March? So we'll buy them again in April and May because the March ones may not make it. But start with a healthy transplant, one that has roots all the way to the side of the growing medium, one that seems to be in balance with a top and a root system. They can be started indoors 6 to 8 weeks earlier. You can get these germination trays, even one with a dome to help regulate humidity and temperature. So you can go as far as you want, or you can be lazy like me and just buy a few transplants. This year, I threatened to buy some seeds again. The closer we get to moving them outside, we can put trays into a cold frame, or we can move them from the carport, the garage, outside, let them start acclimating to the environmental conditions that they're fixing to be forced into. And I didn't mean to do that. Our transplants typically come from Bonnie. They've been very well cared for. Bonnie does a great job. I wouldn't take them home and plant them the same day. Give them a little time to acclimate. Start with a healthy transplant. Your transplant, before you put it in the ground, pinch off those lower leaves and you will plant that tomato deep. That is the only exception. Every other transplant, you plant level with the root ball into the soil it's going, except for tomatoes. Tomatoes can be planted deep. Prune off the lower limbs and plant it as deep as those first sets of true leaves, as this gardener is doing here. Firm that soil up around that transplant, plant it as deep up to the upper sets of true leaves. And remember your spacing. This is a point where I'm trying to emphasize after proper planting, and you'll come in with your stakes soon after. These cages work pretty well for bush type, not so good for indeterminate varieties. This looks to be on about a 4-foot spacing out in the garden to keep down disease and insect problems. With a mulch, so get them upright and keep them staked. More on staking and pruning. As I mentioned, a wire cage is quite suitable for tomatoes, especially determinate varieties. A single stake is the most effective, easiest, and usually cheaper. And you'll start soon after you get them transplanted to put that stake in the ground. And then when it's about 6, 8, 10 inches tall, start attaching it to the stake. This is using just flagging ribbon. The bottom right shows using a plant clip. So keep them upright and staked. Certainly keep the lower leaves pruned off of them. That's not the slide that was coming next. Next one is on a trellis system, simple trellis system in a backyard. But that needs to go in soon after you put the transplants in the ground. You will want to keep the lower leaves pruned off. There is a mulch here, but keep those lower leaves pruned off. And depending on your level of pruning, maintenance that you want to require, you can prune those indeterminate varieties all up and down that single vine, which is trained to a single string, which is attached. This is in a high tunnel, which is attached to a support system to keep that string and that plant growing upright. Suggestion shots, you can learn more about that part in that commercial publication. Upper right corner, the picture shows at least one part of the plant you do need to prune. This is the sucker that grows in the leaf axil, the junction where two leaves are meet or the vine is coming on out. Keep that pruned out. Prune them out typically before they're about pencil size. Clip them or break them. Clip them with scissors or pruners, or they can be broken. And if they're big enough, you can root those and get new plants from that. So just have to throw those away. And then last shot, I hope, of pruning is on the Florida weave system. I know this photograph is stretched, but I couldn't see it any other way. And they obviously had plenty of time on their hands to plant these posts instead of a T-post or a different type of stake. And then a Florida weave, just twine that is woven in and out and around and about. And it drives me crazy the few times that I've tried to do that. But go ahead if that's going to fit your system. Irrigation is going to be needed. Irrigation is best applied via a drip or soaker hose, delivering it right to where we want it, the root zone over that plant. Several options. If you've got a labor source, hand watering, a few raised beds, or a small garden plot, typically can be done, but don't wet the leaves if you can avoid it. Overhead irrigation, if that is how you need to go, should be done between 9 p.m. and 9 a.m. Try to get that water turned off before the dew that falls during the night is typically dry the next morning. If you can have overhead irrigation turned off by 7 or 8 in the morning, it won't contribute as much to the incidence of diseases. Soaker hoses are an easy way to go. You can get them in grids or mats. Go to a garden center and find just about any type of irrigation system that you want. Drip irrigation fed off of a header pipe coming from whatever the source may be, well or pump. You can design your own drip irrigation system and deliver that at these points where you'll have those plants. You could also use soaker hoses. Soaker hoses will drip or sweat all along that hose. Understand that often you won't get but a year or two's life out of drip tubing. Soaker hoses can last a little bit longer if you'll take those up at the end of a garden season. All right, let's check on time. I'm about 5 minutes away from Brooklyn's drop dead hour. The next parts of this goes into fertilization that give us N, P, and K. I'm going to try to pick up my pace, Brooklyn. And it shows you the percent by volume of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, such as 10, 10, 10. It is always nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, percent by volume. If you've got 50 pounds, 10 plus 10 plus 10 is 30%. 30 pounds of nutrients in that 50-pound bag. You may hear it, a starter solution talked about. That's a liquid solution that I'll give you a recipe in a moment that stimulates early growth and can help increase both the yield total as well as giving you yield earlier. To make a starter solution, you can dissolve a pound of a balanced fertilizer, such as 10, 10, 10, into a 5-gallon bucket of water. Let it soak for 24 hours, drain off the liquid, exclude the sediment, and then 1 cup per plant when you put that transplant out is your pre-plant fertilization. From the Home Garden publication, this is the section on fertilizing. What we've just done is applied a starter solution. But if we didn't do that prior to transplanting, we would incorporate. Of course, you're going to soil test through the Pike County office. Without that soil test, we would suggest using 1.5 pounds of that balanced fertilizer, such as 10, 10, 10, for 100 square feet of row. When those tomatoes form fruit that are a nickel to a quarter size, fertilize again with about 1 pound per 100 feet of row. That last paragraph, if you overuse nitrogen, especially a soluble, that can lead to excessive vegetative growth and not enough fruit or blooms. Another way to look at that, tomatoes are a medium feeders. Vegetables are divided into light feeders, southern peas, medium feeders, tomatoes and others, heavy feeders, cabbage and others, and various rates of fertilizer for the various feeders. And then maybe the point on here I really wanted to point out here is that 1 8-ounce cup of fertilizer weighs about a half a pound. So when you're trying to figure out, a pound and a half, don't go take the scale. You'll be close enough with an 8-ounce cup, understanding that it is right at 1/2 pound of fertilizer. Even our organic products such as Black Cow and Black Hen has a little bit of nutrient analysis content in it. That's a 2-3-0 analysis, typically not enough to provide the nutrients that you need. You may have a source of animal manures locally. This is horse manure that if it's well composted, not only is it a soil amendment, but it will also provide some nutrients. That's also in here to point out that if you're getting horse manure or even a mulch product from a farmer, a cattleman, a horseman, a hay grower, ask them if they use herbicides that may be passing through the animal and into the manure, or leaving a residue in the vegetables that can be very injurious to solanaceous plants. As I pointed out, if you fertilize with a liquid and you go overboard, you will forego reproduction or fruit at the expense of the vegetation. You had a 10-foot tall plant with very few blooms and very few fruit. If things are not right, tomatoes could be one of the most finicky plants to grow. There are numerous deficiencies that they can experience and suffer from. Factors that affect the correct nutrient uptake are varied. Anything from the wrong pH, the soil type, too sandy, particularly can affect that. The amount of rainfall and irrigation and these other factors can affect nutrient uptake. N, P, and K are the ones I picked out to show you nitrogen deficiency. Typically in this photograph, the problem's going to be with older, lower leaves, yellowing or paling of that leaf. Can be deficient, but it can also be too much. And if that case, the entire plant is going to yellow up. Phosphorus will appear as on the underneath side, you'll get a purple discoloration of the veins in that. That can be caused by several reasons: cold soils, overly wet soils, pH can affect it, either too low or too high, and then potassium occurring on the younger leaves. The uppermost leaves is a necrotic area, necrosis in that leaf, yellowing, paling out, chlorotic in between the veins. But there are numerous other minerals that could be deficient as well. One of the most aggravating is a calcium deficiency that leads to blossom end rot. That's this right here, caused by low pH, poor moisture management. Over fertilization can contribute to that. Even some vegetables will show you an upward cupping of the leaf if it is deficient in calcium. I'm going to try to quickly move through insect and diseases. Another one of the publications that we've got, I hope I put this slide in there, is our Georgia Pest Management Handbook. You should take a look at that and see all the various types of information you can get in that book. Point here, if you're going to use chemical sprays, whether they're organic or inorganic, if you have something for weeds as well as something for insects, I would do that out of separate sprayers. One specifically for weeds and then one for insects and diseases. Insects are numerous. Typical insects that we'll have problems with are aphids, thrips, which did not make my list for some reason, hornworms, Japanese beetles, various caterpillars. This is a short list. Regular scouting, growing healthy plants, understanding what's out there, then using Brooklyn's services to identify and recommend a pest management strategy is a great way to go. Point out a couple of pests. Everybody recognizes this guy as a hornworm. Could be a tomato or a tobacco. I think the 7 chevrons, I think, are indicative of a tobacco hornworm. Can consume your tomato overnight. Eat a plant a day, almost even faster. There's one to keep. Leave this hornworm in the garden because it has been attacked by a beneficial pest, a braconid wasp that laid eggs that developed into that cocoon and will hatch more of them. So if you're fortunate to find one like that, don't put that one under your right foot or your left foot. Leave that one in the garden. More braconids will come from it. This is a page from the Georgia Pest Management Handbook that shows the various pests that we may have. It's 2 different pages out of the book, so a screenshot was not very friendly. This one actually goes first, and this part is on the second page. You get the pest, a suggestion on what can control it, an amount of that product to use. This column shows you the pre-harvest interval, which will be information found on that product label. That tells you the number of days you must wait once you apply it until you can harvest. And then sometimes there's a remark or a particular note that they want us to know about. But understand that Georgia Pest Management Handbook is another tool for you to use, especially if you can't get in touch with Brooklyn. Okay, tomatoes, there are numerous, and you're avoiding problems is the best way to go. So a healthy plant. Diseases start when we have the proper environment, the host, in this case, the tomato, and the pathogen, which are naturally occurring in our environment. We have those 3 things in that disease triangle, and you can have that disease. Check out and find this book and understand the symptoms. You'll see symptoms. You'll see a section that talks about the preventative practices for you to maintain. Both of those books have no, not both. I think this is the tomato book, but also the commercial tomato handbook also has a lot of common insects that you can see and review as well on growing those tomatoes. From the Pest Management Handbook, you'll see the tomato diseases. The important part here is, folks, this is it. We cannot cure a disease. We can't even come close to fixing a virus, but we're not going to fix a disease. So if we think the environmental conditions are going to be right and we act in a preventative manner, putting a spray out early can help to prevent the extent of that problem. Those are the products that are labeled for use on that crop. And there's a page for all the crops. So check out, find the Georgia Pest Management Handbook, the Home and Garden Edition, and go through the various chapters. There's a summation on disease management. You'll need to trust yourself that growing a healthy plant is your best prevention, but doing all these good cultural practices that we spent not nearly enough time on will help you to avoid that. When you get to that part that a plant is showing disease, it's reddening from the ground up. You've got a limb, a branch that is red, that is mottled, that is speckled, that is water soaked with lesions. Get rid of that plant. Just eliminate that plant or that part of the plant and do away with it. Don't put those diseased plants or plant parts into your compost pile. Many times that compost pile will not heat up enough to destroy those pathogens. Sanitation is, and growing a healthy plant is your number one defense. Viruses we cannot defeat. and they'll show up as deformed leaves, a lot of strange coloration in that plant. Um, we have no fix for viruses, and there are several viruses. One of the most common is tomato spotted wilt virus and tobacco mosaic virus. Every year, there's lots of questions on what's hurting my tomato. Often it is the use of glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup. A tomato only needs to smell it, seemingly to react to it, but you'll get a chlorotic part to that plant wherever that chemical hit. There are numerous physiological and environmental disorders. We got to go, Brooklyn. We talked about blossom end rot. Trim that part off, eat the rest, and know that you can feed it calcium chloride to correct it. Correct your pH if it's a problem. Avoid over-fertilization and improper watering. There's all sorts of ripening problem. This is blotchy ripening that you may see. Environmental conditions can make that worse or better. There is an environmental condition called as leaf roll that summer heat and high temperatures will make that curl up. If it unfurls and you got a pretty leaf the next morning, that's environmental leaf roll from environmental stress. But there are other stresses that can cause that as well. Just be aware of it. Fruit cracking is very common. Going too dry, and all of a sudden we get some moisture, quick growth and expansion, and the tomatoes crack. Various common problems. Tomatoes need proper pollination, can get all sorts of strange looking fruit. These cat facing or bloom scars left on them. Sometimes you might even need to prune some fruit to get rid of fruit that's looking bad, insect attacked. Improper pollination, blooms stuck to the fruit can contribute to this cat facing as well. What's going on with this one? Somebody let a tomato get too ripe and it's in too warm of an environment and the seeds inside have started. All right, I can't believe I got through those 70 slides in less than 60 minutes, just about 50. I've got time for questions or whatever else Brooklyn advises that we want to do. So, Brooklyn, what's next?
Thank you so much, Wade.